Hi, I'm Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon.
And you are listening to the Optimized AF podcast.
We know life is hard. We're here to make it simple.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Optimized AF podcast. This is Blake.
And I'm Stacie. And today we're talking about a book. And it's called The Coaching Habit.
Yeah, we haven't brought a book review since season 1.
And because we really felt like you needed to go deep on this one, because it's a mixture of coaching, which Blake and I both hold very near and dear as far as our own practice on how we lead and how we coach leadership. But it's part of it's habit, which we've talked about since the very first episode of the very first season. So we wanted to take a deep dive on this one and a little story. And if you are watching our YouTube, we have the book right here. Blake and I both do. I just bought this book, by the way, for 2 of the leaders on my team that lead teams. So, and they both have had really great feedback, but also said, I might just wait for your optimized episodes to come out so that I don't have to read it.
Hey, it's a good strategy.
It's fair. So I found this book in an airport when I was actually traveling for ETW, and I was drawn to it because it's really laid out like a workbook. It's really laid out well on breaking out the parts and pieces. And today on this episode, we're really going to be talking about kind of the what and the why and the how. So kind of the basic stuff. And then as we go and bleed into episode 2 and 3 of this, we're going to get a little bit deeper into the mechanics of the things that you can take away, which is always our goal, and apply immediately.
Yeah, I think, the book, if you're going to pick it up and read it, which I highly recommend that you do, I know Stacie does as well, it is sort of embodies what this podcast is all about. It is really simply put together. It breaks it down in a very easily digestible way. And I think it gives you very applicable ways to put it into practice immediately. Okay. Yep. So, listen obviously to what we're covering here, but I say pick up the book. It does have a few pages in there throughout the book that you can, they're sort of interactive, like you said, like a workbook style. So it's very good that way.
Yep. And we're going to start with the what. And Blake and I have had this conversation many, many times over the past several years about what is coaching, because coaching is very loosely used by leaders on how they approach leadership. But I think we want to get a little bit specific on what it is and what it is not, because it is actually a very specific modality of how to have a conversation, how to help someone else lead the conversation. Actually, you're not leading the conversation, they are. And then also how to really help someone find their best self, but it's really their work. It's not your work. So that's some of what we're going to talk about first. And so one thing I'll say right off the top is coaching is not mentorship. So just to be clear, that term is used a lot, that, I coach someone else, and what I do is I share my advice or been there, done that. I'm not saying that that's not valuable, because it is.
It absolutely is, yeah.
But it's not coaching. And that gets used, I think, quite a bit in our experience.
Well, it's also not therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, so therapy also, you think about, coaching sometimes gets wrapped into this. Well, what are you holding on to? What's really in your past? Let's dig through that. No, that's not coaching. That is therapy. There are experts and professionals in that field that help people really look deeply into their past and uncover what are the things that are still driving your behaviors today that is from an experience that you had, years or decades ago. It's also not, you already talked about mentorship. There are distinct differences in how you give the advice or how you allow someone to understand the sort of come to the conclusion on their own, I guess is the best way to say it.
It's and don't lead the witness. And we're going to talk about all these things. So again, our whole goal here is to make this simple and not make it more complex. So we're going to break these elements down and teach you how to do those things, because I think some of the best things I've ever learned about being a leader are really around this practice, this habit, very specifically, of coaching. So it does bring us back to the fact coaching is a habit if it's done well. And it does take practice and it takes intention to start to build the muscle around how do you step into a coaching conversation versus a mentorship conversation versus, giving somebody constructive feedback. Those are all very different things. So I think if you're planning to utilize this as a one-on-one strategy, I wouldn't do every one-on-one as a coaching session, but I think it can be valuable for a one-on-one session.
Yeah. I mean, right. You and I have both, Stacie, we've both done this from a very structured standpoint. You have a coaching call scheduled every week or every month, and it's on the second Tuesday at 10 a.m. and it's set in place. The author of this book, they go into saying the best way to go about coaching is that it is very ad hoc. It's very, in the moment when it's applicable. You don't schedule it. It becomes very mundane at that point. So I think, for the application of the coaching style, I'll call it, it has to really fit for whatever your particular environment is. I find value in actually, and I believe the people that I coach as well, to know that this session is coming, but it also depends on what you're coaching them for. The particular group of people that I work with currently, it is primarily about accountability. So that is a very structured thing of saying, look, we're going to talk about very specific things that you're set as a focus that you want to accomplish. And so then on a structured basis, on a certain cadence, we are going to talk about what are the challenges getting in front of you, how are you working through those hurdles, and I'm going to hold you accountable to what you said you were going to do the prior week, sort of a structure. In the book here, though, it talks about very specific questions, and the questions are based around how you lead someone towards their own discovery versus providing them with the answers. But I do want to interject something here because I don't want people to think this is only applicable to people who are in the business world that lead teams. Some of the most profound coaching, as I understood the practice of coaching, was it was actually experienced the first time in how my dad raised me in his parenting style. There were certainly factors about his parenting style that were not coaching, but in many times when I think about the actual coaching act of asking more questions than telling me what to do in order for me to learn and grow and discover on my own, that was by far the most powerful and prolific thing that he did. When I think about certain experiences in my past that really, we talked about, kind of the things that just etch into your memory. They're forever going to be cemented into what built you into the person you are. Nearly every single one of those memories and experiences came from what I would summarize now today with the knowledge I have of this practice was a coaching moment that my dad had with me.
And I think some of the best coaching I've ever had is informal. And I think as a parent, so the why behind coaching to say, why would you use this as a parent? What it says in the book is nothing is more powerful than unlocking someone's potential. So isn't that our whole goal as parents, to let our children be the magic that we know that they are, but on their own and in their own terms and in their own journey, which is hard. I mean, again, you watch the brick wall coming and you watch them running into it, as teenagers tend to do. And it is hard to hold back and not try to jump in and save them. But I think when you can put that coaching hat on in an informal way, on an ongoing basis as a parent, it is some of the more powerful things. But also in leading teams, it is the moments, and this specific example actually comes to mind. I was leading a team at a larger organization. I was pretty young. I mean, we've talked about this before. You and I were in leadership roles when we really had no idea what we were doing. And I had a really great leader at the time. And I couldn't have even told you, like you said about your dad, I couldn't have even told you why he was good at what he did. I didn't really understand it at that time, but he was a really good coach. And I remember I walked in, and we're going to talk about some of these techniques over the next few episodes, but I walked in and the first thing he sort of said to me was, what's going on in your world? Like that was always his kind of first question. And it's funny, when I read this book, it's like immediately thought of him. But I was really struggling with the fact that we were doing an acquisition. We had a lot of friction happening on the team with the new integrated team that we were taking at a different site. And it was honestly like 1,000 things. You walk in sometimes and it feels like all the things are happening all at the same time. It's very similar to my household with 4 teenagers. All the things all at the same time. It's never like one thing. It's always 10 things. So I think what was powerful in reading this book and just some of the examples in my life as I started to think back is that it was those informal moments that probably had the greatest impact on me. We weren't having a one-on-one, but I was very overwhelmed. And he definitely used some of these techniques to get me to unwind for myself and figure it out. And I really such a blessing early in your career to have someone that helps you really figure it out for yourself versus giving you the answer. It's helpful, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the most applicable example obviously is translates to sports. Obviously, the label coach, that's where we get that from. But when you think about what some of the most influential and impactful and successful coaches, what are they really doing? Now, forget about what the players or the team or the employees are executing on, right? It could be a football game or it could be an acquisition, like you said. The coach, their job is to get the best out of the people that are reporting to them or that are under them or however you want to label it. It's no different in the household. The household's the same way. A mom or a dad, the thing that you want the most is to get the best out of your youngsters, right? Whatever ages they're at, you want the best thing for them. And so what are they really doing? Well, they're creating culture, of course. They're creating camaraderie. They're doing all the things that we've talked about in previous episodes. But when they have those interactions with a player, they're not going to get, I'll use baseball for an example. They're not going to step in there and swing the bat for you. Hell, they're not even going to step in the batter's box and like help you position your hands, right? They're going to force you to say, you've struck out, right? Your batting average is really suffering. What do you think is going on? What's in your head? And then it's going to be a series of questions that are going to lead that player towards a discovery of, you know what, I think this is what's going on. I think this is the biggest challenge in front of me. And I think the best way for me to deal with it is, but it's not a natural thing that we tend to do. One of the things that people struggle with the most is they don't find value in just posing questions. What's so valuable about me asking you what's on your mind? What's so valuable about that? So you think about it in an organization, and you might be asking yourself, well, why would I ever implement a coaching methodology across my leadership team? I don't want people just asking questions. I put those people in positions to make decisions. I want them to be the subject matter experts that have the answers and can solve the problems. And that's the world that I'd say we've always been in for the most part. There's some organizations that's not the case. So this is not a catch-all be-all statement. But for the most part, if you carry a title and a paycheck at a higher level in an organization, the expectation is that you are the one solving the problems in most cases, not all. And especially at the middle manager level.
Yep.
But I would implore people to really stop and think about what is the most important thing for that person to do is that they still need to focus on how do I not solve this for my team, but instead coach them to understand how they can solve it for themselves.
And I think it's a great way to position a mindset. So I think as you're thinking about developing a coaching habit, to Blake's point, to use the sports analogy, to pick a sport, doesn't matter. I don't know baseball very well. But I'll say that, let's take football as a fairly universal.
Do you want to use bobsledding? Let's go with bobsledding. Sure. We use curling. Yeah.
I knew you were going to go there. But, when you have a challenge in front of you with a teammate, I think it's a good mindset to say, what if this was a sports team and they were all out on the football field and I was on the sidelines, would I run out and run the play? Nope, probably wouldn't do that. What's the value of being on the sideline? You can see the big picture, right? You're helping that person understand the full field in play. So that's number one. And number two, it's always easier as an outsider to see the patterns that are happening on the field. And so as a leader, I think you're absolutely right. We've been taught many times that even as senior leaders, that you're the problem solver. And I think the mindset shift that happened for me, probably don't know, a couple of positions ago for me was that mindset shift of that's not really what a great coach does. And a great coach is here to provide the perspective and understand the bigger picture strategy and even draw out the strategy, right? The coach sometimes is calling the play, but not all the time, by the way. Sometimes in the moment, the players are calling the play. And I think the how on coaching is powerful questions are really the key for people to unlock their own potential. So what we're going to be talking about over these episodes as well is what are those questions? So let's just get down to brass tacks. When you start to develop this habit, there are some key questions, and I think that's why this book does such a great job of this, that pretty universally you can adopt these questions. Now, I would also say once you get really good at these questions, and he actually lists, was it 7 questions?
Seven.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about all 7 because, again, this is Life is Hard. We make it simple, not Life is Hard. We're going to give you 7 things to do. So we're going to focus on 3 questions over these 3 episodes and really break those things down. But I will say, as you get better and better at a coaching habit, there will become some things that you can sort of customize to your own voice and your own sort of style that work for you over and over again. And I think that is a part of this as an evolution. So endpoint evolution or, down the road evolution, there is probably no endpoint. You can always get better at something, but that's something to consider, that it may feel unnatural right now, but sort of go with what it is. And then as you get better and practice this habit more and more, you can customize kind of how you're saying things and how you're proposing these questions to people.
Yeah. Well, and so once we get into these questions, you'll start to see that the repetitive theme of it will lead you towards what you're talking about, Stacie, is the need and the necessity for you to cater it to what your style is, right? Let's put yourself in the coachee, the person receiving the coaching situation. If you know literally after like 3 coaching sessions, ad hoc or scheduled, exactly what your leader, exactly what the person is going to say. They're always going to ask me this, and then they're going to push me to think about this, and they're going to go to this thing. The value of the coaching starts to diminish over time. It's still valuable, I think, but the person on the receiving end of it is going to feel like it is very cookie cutter in its approach. So although the book does a great job of laying out these 7 questions, I would argue that the person who even wrote this book, this author in particular, does not approach every single coaching session with the same exact 7 questions every time. That would be ridiculous.
Yep.
So you do have to listen to these from a foundational standpoint of a place to get started, but learn your style, learn your team. Again, we've talked about this on previous podcasts that the episodes that we covered, we talked about the necessity for you to understand the individual personalities on your team and what really motivates and drives them. And then cater your coaching to that style. But the 7 questions are foundationally a good place to start. I thought one thing we could do on this first episode also is start to talk about what does a coaching session usually sort of look and feel like a little bit. Because if I bring it back again for the listeners, what we're talking about is a style and a methodology around how to lead people. There's plenty of them out there, but the coaching methodology, the coaching style of leadership is a very specific modality, and it can be found within many places. We talked about it. Now, I would say in the last several years, but especially in the last year, I think a lot of people have gone to this coaching thing like life coaching. Let's talk about that, right? I think there's a lot of value in people who invest in a life coach, but I also think that the term life coach has started to get some, I'll call it negative press, if you will, because everybody felt like I give great advice. Yeah. Right. Why wouldn't somebody who's going through some of the same challenges that I've gone through want to hear from me about how I overcame those challenges and how I got through those things? So yeah, of course I could be. But to your point earlier, Stacie, and I really want to drive this home for the listeners, is that when you do that, when you enter into this space of saying, I have gone through this particular challenge, and therefore I'm an expert in giving advice on how other people can navigate this challenge, that is not coaching in necessarily. Now, you could certainly cater your style to it, but that lends itself very easily into that mentorship.
Yeah. And I think this is a function a bit of servant leadership, because this is a leadership style that is much more about the person than it is about you. So I think you have to decide if this is the right style for you as well. I don't think every leader is great at coaching. I would say great leaders typically utilize coaching as part of their style. In my experience, pretty much trying to think, I would say across the board, the best leaders I ever had asked me some great questions and really wanted me to navigate to solutions on my own and dig. Here's the thing, dig deeper into the why behind my thought process. And I think that's another key of coaching. Please expect your folks to have to struggle a little bit and be uncomfortable with the fact that sometimes you're going to be asking them to think a little bit deeper than if they've never had this type of leadership before, than they've probably thought about in the past. So I had a one-on-one this week with someone, and she'd asked me a pretty simple question, and I asked her a question back, which I don't think she was ready for. So it can create some discomfort on the end of the person receiving this. And sometimes I'll just say, hey, a big thing that I believe in is developing a coaching style for the team that I'm leading. And so don't be put off that sometimes you'll ask me a question and I'm going to ask you a question back. I'll just tell people that's sort of part of my style. I do want to help you get to that answer, but really the work is on you to find that answer and get to the motivation behind why you're doing what you're doing, because until you answer that question, nothing's probably ever going to change. You're going to continue to have the same patterning of behavior. We're going to finish this episode by doing a little bit of a role play, which is probably the first time we've ever done that. But in order to sort of intro this first question, I want to sort of role play how a lot of coaching conversations or one-on-ones typically start. And so that we can, in the next episode, give you some advice on maybe a better way to start coaching conversations. So I
was very unprepared for this.
I apologize. I don't really apologize at all.
We're role-playing?
We're role-playing.
What character do I play?
You're going to be... I don't know. Who do you want to be?
I don't know. I need to get into character though. There's got to be. There's makeup. There's hair. There's a. No,
you're gonna be. You're gonna be Balake.
Balake. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
You're gonna be. We'll say that you're not even somebody who reports into my team, but I'm a leader inside of the organization. You and I are, meeting up for, let's call it a skip level or more of an informal conversation. You're looking for advice, and we're, going to sit down and have a conversation. So here's sometimes the way that I've seen this happen for folks, and it creates a lot of discomfort for an employee, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So you're walking into my office, let's just say, you sit down. So
hey Stacie, you got a moment?
Hey, yeah, I knew we were going to have time today. I was really looking forward to it. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Good. Yeah. It's going to be a really nice weekend. I think, my family and I are going to try to spend some time outside, and, we have a dog, so we're going to take our dog. Do you have a dog?
We do have a dog. Yeah. I didn't know you had a dog. What kind of a dog is it?
He's a mini Newfie Poo. He's kind of, big fluffy. Yeah. He's totally fluffy.
Okay.
Yeah. What kind of dog do you have?
Border Aussie.
Oh,
yeah,
so
she's great.
Yeah. So really we both have mutts.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. And what else? Do you have kids?
We do. Yeah. 2.
Yeah.
I thought you knew that.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
I maybe I knew that and I forgot.
And this goes on and
on.
And
this on. So, tune in to this next episode.
Because we're chit-chatting.
Yeah.
That's how that goes.
This is not helpful.
Well, what they think they're doing is they think you're building rapport.
Right.
So we had a little fun. Okay, thank you for indulging us. But the thing that most leaders do is they think the best way to build rapport and build a relationship with the person that you're going to give advice to. And that's what it comes in. The key is here is that if somebody's going to receive my advice, I first need to break down any artificial barriers that they have in place for me to be able to, basically express what I want them to do and have them receive it and then go do it. So most leaders start off with this chit chat, small talk around relating with somebody. I don't want to diminish that. I think it's very important to have a relationship building component of leadership, but that is not a coaching session. So this episode is very much obviously a coaching session. We're talking about the coaching habit, and what most conversations start off with in that role play is not coaching. That's not getting down to brass tacks, not getting down to something that's valuable for the person that came in and had a need. And in that case, the need was not filled.
Yep. So tune in to our next episode. We'll look forward to continuing this topic of conversation, and we'll leave you with this little bit of a cliffhanger for the next week on how you can really have a much more valuable start to those conversations.
Yes, come back to see what happens with whatever we were talking about there. Maybe you'll find out what the weather's going to be next week. Maybe we'll talk about the weather next.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks for listening to our show. You can find Blake and I on social media channels at Blake Rayhans and at Stacie Mallon.
Be sure to follow Optimized AF on Instagram and rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. See you next time.